Hey everybody, welcome to We've Got Ward, a Doof media podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of parahumans. My name is Matt Freeman, and I have here Scott Daly, who I am going to ask an invasive personal question on air.
And my answer to that invasive personal question is once, but I didn't really like it. This is the weekly podcast where you and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of strategic showmanship, a triumvirate of assholes, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week, it's showtime as we cover 8.11 and 8.12. Breakthrough rolls the PR dice and decides to appear on Hard Boil, not only to defend Kenzie, but to argue on behalf of all parahumans. It's time to release some secrets, Matt.
Yeah, these are two very intense chapters. It is not hyperbole to say that my heart was pounding for both of them, actually. I was nervous reading these chapters, nervous for our characters, nervous for what could happen and the twists and turns this could take. I think there's a lot of very clever things Wildbow's doing that amp up that nervousness, and I hope that we get a chance to talk about those things.
Yeah, fun fact, Matt was nervous not only while reading the chapters, but in between the chapters. So he was just been nervous from Tuesday morning to Saturday afternoon. It was rough. It was a rough week.
Yeah, I know. I should probably stop reading fiction if it's going to affect me like this.
But yeah, I know. I think we've got a lot to say about these chapters. I think there's, as you said, there's so much going on. There's so much he's doing here to create the kind of tension that we're seeing, and I think we're gonna spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah, but before we get into that, a couple of announcements first. Final reminder, I suppose, for the fan art contest. Only 2 more days to submit your entry for the 4th Worm/Ward Parahumans quarterly fan art contest. Entries are due this Friday, August 17th at 11:59 Central Time. Check out the link in the description of this episode for more details.
Yeah, get those in, guys. Come on, you can do it.
There's time. There's time.
And one more quick announcement. We're going to be those guys. I'm sorry, but we're going to be those guys that ask you to subscribe to our YouTube page. We're like 10 subscriptions short from 1,000, and it doesn't, as you said last week, this doesn't matter, but it matters. So yeah. Even if you don't listen to us on YouTube, if you could take the time, go over there and click that subscribe button. We are like talking about and planning to do maybe some YouTube content in the future. So this way you won't miss it if we just drop it as a surprise. So
just think how that would feel.
It would feel amazing.
I assume so.
You would be the most powerful person on the planet.
Yeah, you'd be the one who did it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, our custom URL for that is still youtube.com/The Daily Planet Podcast, because like every time I try to change it, YouTube just says error. I can't.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why. But you can just go to YouTube and search for Doof Media. You'll find it that way too. But that's our custom URL.
But we're not gonna start a new channel.
No, heck no.
All right.
You know how long it's taken to get the 1,000 subscribers?
I know, exactly. All right. So now moving on to the community spotlight, where we read what people wrote from last week's thread. And the discussion question / apparently fiction writing prompt from last week was, how would you handle a PR problem with your Cape team? And people got really into this one. I was really happy with the responses.
Yeah.
And actually because of that, we're not going to be able to go into full detail on all these comments, but it basically read like a whole bunch of really excellent and fun and interesting fiction. So, for example, Hero of Old Iron goes into like a list of sort of archetypal parahumans characters like Legend, Dragon, Defiant, Chevalier, and kind of sketches what he would do to handle the PR fiasco caused by their own particular foibles coming to light. Like, for example, Legend being outed as part of Cauldron. How do you handle that? Well, you emphasize all the good that he's done, and you try to emphasize the good that other Cauldron capes have done. And he kind of goes down that list and points out the way of dealing with how you handle this particular cape showing their weak side.
Yeah, I thought those are a lot of cool ones because it's just like him taking all these characters we love and characters that normally, like I think he even says, I've picked these people so PR would never be a problem, but even if it is, let's look at how we could handle some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Up next is Bisexual Punch Party, who hasn't, I don't think he's answered a question of ours in a while, so welcome back. They basically go through and outline some of the major issues that any cape would have, any kind of PR issue a cape would have. Like one of theirs is capes are scary, capes operate as vigilantes, a team member is a bigot, and a team member is a formal criminal. And they go through how the PR would handle, how they would handle each one of those through PR. For the capes are scary, like they mentioned stuff to the effect of the team should do everything to humanize themselves as regular people with families and interests, things that bind them to society, basically things that force people to be reminded that they are human, which is ironically kind of the opposite of what Victoria chooses to do. But I think that was a really good point. And I think that's something we saw in a lot of our things. Is like a lot of the PR issues is force people to see you as a human being and not as your mask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that approach where it's sort of, this is the spirit in which I sort of thought people were going to take the prompt of like, generally speaking, how do you deal with PR problems? But people like Sammy here, they take a more specific example. Sammy writes about a purely hypothetical cape who had some of his old tweets unearthed by a rival team, and the highly inappropriate jokes in his old tweets were used as a justification for getting him fired from his team, and his team is, and then Sammy goes on to try to advise what his team should do. For example, give him some time, let some time pass, and then bring him back on in a more limited capacity, and get him to do some charity work to rehabilitate his image, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's really fortunate that this purely hypothetical situation, one of this fired guy, I think he was the director of the team, I think is what
okay.
Sammy said, and one of his team members, I think his name was Drex, really like stood up and defended him. And really like said, no, he should not have been fired, should definitely be on the team. And kind of all the team got together and like signed a statement actually showing their support for the director of the team, who I think Sammy said their name was Jimmy Bullet, I think it was. So purely like it's so hypothetical.
Yeah.
But really creative.
What a wild creative mind Sammy has.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I almost got to that with a straight face. I almost did. Next up, we have Danielle, who actually sent her answer in via email, and she kind of outlines a whole situation with a team member. This is one of we're getting more into like the actual writing prop things, where she comes up with a situation of a hypothetical team member who is having a relationship with a villain. And this relationship he's been keeping secret from the entire team, and actually has been like secretly sabotaging their group to make sure that his team member stays free, and the trials and tribulations that could come from that, as that is discovered by the group and by the world at large. And in Danielle's hypothetical situation, it doesn't end well. It gets into some pretty depressing master powers and emotional manipulation and things like that. It's a very creative idea, though. I really like this response.
Yeah, I enjoyed reading that one. Segueing from that, we get into literal headcanon's answer, which is not so much a hero experiencing a PR problem as like a horrible person getting their comeuppance. And it's like two whole pages, and I can't. That's kind of the most thumbnail summary I can give you, but it's pretty it's very warm. Yeah.
I mean, that's the cool thing about this prompt, I think, was like it's so hard for us to read and talk about your submissions this week on air, because like they're also in depth. Like it's really tough to summarize them in a quick, succinct way. But no, even those of you we didn't cover this week, like, know that we loved everything you guys did. Like, there's so many different answers, so many different ideas. It was all great. It was so much fun to read it, and it's just like, it's the nature of the prompt is it makes it harder to cover them on air. So you guys did awesome.
Yeah,
you did so great.
I'm inclined to give more of these writing prompt style.
Yeah, I think we
questions.
are. And I just wanted to say before we move on, that person Danielle who sent us her Cape love story, Romeo and Juliet love story here, also sent us like a very long email, just working through some analysis they had. And I just wanted to say, like, again, that's not something we have time to, like, I would love to, like, read your entire email out on the air because I think you had some really incisive, wonderful points that I would want to share with people, but we just don't have time to do that. So I just wanted to acknowledge you. I try to acknowledge everyone that sends us messages because I appreciate you guys taking the time to do so. It's just we can't like cover them in depth on the show. Like, like I always feel bad about that, but we just can't do it. So please, everyone, Danielle, thank you so much for sending that email, and everyone keep sending us messages. We love to read them. We won't always cover them, and I try to respond, but we don't always respond to, but we just know that we see them and we love them.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. It makes it all worth it.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to some general comments that people had.
Yeah, I think literally everybody pointed out, Matt, that we're thinking of a Katie did, which is funny because I think you said that like as soon as we stopped pressing the record button, like as soon as we were done with the show and we stopped pressing record, you were like, I think I was thinking of Katie did.
Yeah, I think, it sounds similar, right? Yeah.
And everyone said that. I think there's at least 5 or 6 people in the comments who pointed that out. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah. And also established Carol scholar Megafire points out that Carol's willingness to put a decision out of her hands and into Vicky's with regard to whether they should or should not stay involved with the Cape Community Organization was a huge extension of trust. Megafire points out that this is a big deal for Carol to trust, as trust has been a huge issue for her in the past.
Yeah, I think we pointed out in our show that this was a big deal for their relationship, but Megafire rightly pointed out that, hey, this is not only a big step for them in a relationship, but it's a big personal step for Carol, as trust has been something that she's dealt with her entire life, and it's one of the reasons why her relationship with her daughter is so rocky, because she just has so much trouble extending that level of trust. And Megafire rightly points out that, hey, look, she did that, and let's give her a pat on the back for it.
Yeah. It's always good to give. It's easy to get on the Carol hating train, but
sure.
I think this is one case where it's like, good on her.
Yeah, we got one.
We'll see if she can keep it up for 2 chapters.
Oh boy.
Yeah. All right. Move into the beginning of this section, chapter 8.11, and Breakthrough takes the stage. We get a description of the triumvirate connotations of TV hosts who will come to know. Lynn Chess is the put-together mediator of the trio. Hamza Corey is the incorrigible provocateur, and John Combs seems to be the clean-cut face man who Victoria has mostly overlooked up till now. But who kind of sneaks up on our characters, I think. Yeah,
I think we'll have much to say about these guys as we go through the chapter, and most of it will be bad. But I was stricken with just like how much this is positioned and framed as a very relatable cable news segment to our world. We've got, like, demographically, these 3 people are exactly like, the Fox News show Fox and Friends, although I don't think Fox would ever let someone named Hamza Corey on their show. But anyway, but the name is Hard Boil, which I think is a clear allusion to Hardball, which I think is an MSNBC. I don't watch cable news, so I know the names. I don't really know much about these shows.
No one in our age cohort does.
Yeah, because they're terrible. They're awful. Anyway, I just think we're clearly constructing ourselves here at some pretty great digs at the idea of these kind of cable news programs and how manipulative and terrible they are. And I think it's just wonderful that we spent time doing this.
Yeah, me too.
And before we move on, I just want to highlight the opening paragraph. I think we talk so much about opening and closing paragraphs in these stories because I think Wildbow is so good at them. And this opening paragraph is, our applause was like most of the applause at a golf match, far from uproarious, provided by expectation, not by free will. All light was reserved for the stage. 4/5 of the expansive room was dark. The audience were nebulous shapes. An audience manager with her back to us kept keeping everything in order. The audience was easy to lose track of, as if the lights were directed our way. As the lights were directed our way, a brightness I had to look past. This is, Matt, some fantastic imagery. All the light was literally on them. This is kind of the most clear allusion to the beacon name we've seen thus far, right? They're standing up on the stage. All the light is on them. They are literally a beacon, and you can take that for both positive and negative connotations. But to see the audience, to see the people they're ostensibly speaking to, they have to look past a blinding light into the darkness. This, I think, shows the central disconnect between cape and non-cape. And it's the very thing that they're hoping to address on this organization, or on the show, rather. And we see that set up here in the very imagery of this opening paragraph. It's really great stuff. And I think it shows just how difficult bridging this gap is going to be.
Exactly. Yeah. This is set up, and it's persistently, emphasized throughout both of these chapters that Victoria isn't really able to play to the crowd because she can't see the crowd. She's in the spotlight and she can't see outside of it. And again, we're pulling all of this light and heat imagery from the previous chapters and really, something that's been persistently present in all of the arc titles. And we're putting that center stage here. It's become an actual plot element. So yeah, the hosts greet them pleasantly for the cameras, I suppose, since they don't plan on being pleasant.
Yeah, before we move on, can we just fuck these guys? Let's just get that out there, and then we can move into it. Fuck these guys so much.
Establish that position and then move on. Capricorn boldly walks across the stage to shake Gary's hand. And Victoria follows him to show solidarity, even though she's uncertain about the move. Gary reacts as though Tristan crushed his hand, which I kind of like to imagine he actually did. But no, he's probably just trying to make Gary's probably just trying to make the big bad cape look too aggressive.
Yeah, I think you said to me after we both read this one that there was, like, in your head, maybe like a 25% chance that he actually just crushed his hand. Yeah. And I mean, I wouldn't put that past Tristan, but I think you can make the argument that he could have done that, but no, I think this is just them playing a game, right? And I love that. I love this as kind of a central setup of what this entire thing is going to be, because Capricorn makes this really, really great optical move where he walks over there to shake his hand and he kind of shoves Gary into a corner. He can either ignore it and look like an asshole, or if he shakes it, he might piss off the people that hate capes. Like, he might be seen to be appeasing them. And he's kind of stuck in this corner, and he handles it in what for him is a very smart way, where, yes, I'm going to shake it, and then I'm going to use that to make you look violent and aggressive. And it's such a smart move. And it's a way to maneuver through the situation. So yeah, I mean, this is what this whole exercise is going to be. It's going to be like this covert game of chess where players on both sides are making moves and counter moves and lining out strategies, but they're doing it like all kind of under the table as the audience just looks on. And I think it's part of what makes this such a fascinating, exciting read.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially after doing a reread and making these notes, I really think it's very unlikely that Capricorn would have taken a risk like that, because he plays this whole interview so well. I just don't think he would have made a slip up like that right out of the gate. I
agree, but the thing that I was surprised with is on the other side of that coin. I don't think Gary, like, I think in that moment I was like convinced, is like, oh, Gary's actually really smart and he's really good at this. But then the rest of his specific interaction throughout this doesn't, to me, show like a really like smart strategy guy. Like he doesn't actually do a good job, in my opinion, throughout a lot of he doesn't do a good job of advancing his narrative throughout a lot of this. And we'll get into that to a bit, but that kind of made me wonder I wonder if Matt was closer to being right. But I agree with you on Tristan, but it's Gary that it is a mystery to me.
Yeah, I feel like we're gonna find out some things at some point. Like, I mean, obviously he has inside information from some entity that wants to undermine the parahumans, wants to create some problem. probably manipulate him. So it's like, did he walk into this with information that he didn't get to use because of the course the conversation took, something like that? I don't know. We're getting way ahead of ourselves, though. I'm gonna hold that back.
Yeah, let's circle back to that.
Yeah. It was funny to me, though, after Capricorn does that, Victoria shakes his hand and says, "Going to pretend like I squeezed your hand too hard, Mr. Nieves," which is just funny in the moment, sort of darkly funny. But it didn't occur to me until the second read through that while Capricorn probably could injure a Muggle's hand by shaking it, Victoria is the one who could turn his hand into a pulp if she wanted.
Yeah, and boy, do I wish she did that.
Yeah. Oh well.
I think that's so great, and I think actually it's part of his lack of reaction to that makes me think he was just that she was right on with his strategy here.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So they open up the show with Victoria showing her face and the hosts commenting on that. Lookout also shows her face, but it's a holographic, different face, which I think that's a good move to kind of humanize her a bit also.
Yeah. I think that there's a chance, and I think I've tried consciously in my notes, and I think you have too, of avoiding getting too repetitive in our analysis. But I think there's a chance that our analysis could get repetitive here because so much of this chapter is, like we said, strategic under the table push and pull conflict between these two sides. One side makes a move, the other counters that move, and this is a really optical, smart ploy by Victoria here. Like we said in some of the discussion questions, the first thing she does is connect people to her human side. She takes down her hood and says, "My name is Victoria first, and oh, this is also my cape name, but I am Victoria. You will see me as human first." And of course, this is all true. Like she says, she never had the luxury of a secret identity, which is accurate. But it's such a smart move to kind of set the tone. I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, right. They're setting out their thesis right in front of everything, which is like, hey, we're just like you guys.
Yeah. And I actually think their whole opening gambit does that whole thing, because we have this whole interaction where they're introducing themselves, and Swansug says, "I'm only here in spirit," and Hamza responds with, "That's odd." And the play on that from Breakthrough is, she's sort of like a teddy bear I brought with me for security, except I'm too grown up for that. So I brought someone cooler than a stuffed animal. I'm glad I'm cooler than a stuffed animal. And this is, it's just fun back and forth, but it's a perfect deflection of the barb and then pushing their interaction as friends and colleagues and not as these mysterious, nebulous, all-powerful creatures. Like it's purposefully showing a comfortable, familial relationship between these two people. Again, to say, look, we're like you. We have friends. We have relationships. We are people. And it's so smart.
Yeah, and Lookout even comes off as slightly childish here,
right,
which immediately makes her seem like less of a threat, which is good. It's good because that's kind of the whole thing they're trying to do here, is make her seem like she's terrifying.
Right.
Yeah, regarding what you said earlier about the risk of this particular analysis getting repetitive, like it's so intense and such a back and forth that at a certain point in these notes, I kind of slipped into like a sports commentating idiom. And I realize, like, I'm not so much analyzing as I'm like, and then they respond like this, and then that's a great feint, but no, and I'm like, wait, that's okay, but yeah, no, it's that's the kind of writing this particular section. It's so intense and it's making you feel those things, so it's you want to focus on it, you want to talk about it. So yeah, so one of the first minor probes, I suppose, by the hosts is John Combs saying he's surprised they came in costume, imagining they would have used suits and masks or something like that. And then Victoria replies, giving us a detailed, analytic cape nerd breakdown on why suits and masks have their own connotations that she didn't necessarily think were good. Tristan follows this up with a reminder of Gold Morning and the bravery of the capes who died defending the multiverse.
Yeah, and I think this is the point where in my analysis I realized why these chapters are so good. The control of the pace of this chapter specifically and both chapters as a whole is great. And I think it's another example, and we've talked about this on the show before, but it's another example of Wildbow using pace to kind of manipulate tension. We started this whole thing very nervous. The tension is high going into this as Victoria first walked on stage. And then we get these little like moments of success drip fed to us as the team seems to be negotiating and navigating the attacks and the problems against him. We dodged that. We deflected this one. This is another example of that. There's this kind of bullshit probe by John about like, oh, I'm surprised you're not wearing suits, which why would, what? That's a stupid thing to say. But they deflect it and they move on. And it's this slow, controlled kind of release of tension that makes the reader go, okay, we're doing good so far. This is good. And I think it's great that Victoria almost reflects that same feeling that the reader is having. Like there's this moment where she says, okay, good, gold morning. We were gonna get there sooner or later. So him pivoting to this now is good. We're doing good. I think it serves to line up the reader and Victoria's thought process as they're sharing the same kind of thought process as they're analyzing what's happening before them, and that puts you on literally the same page as Victoria, which again helps manage that tension. You're with your narrator voice. Yeah.
One thing that I think we can do in this kind of analysis as we walk through is provide the perspective on Victoria's behavior that she isn't privy to. Like, for example, the fact that she chose to respond to his probe with, like I said, like a very obvious cape nerd, kind of almost like too much detail and the kind of thing that only people who think capes are cool would know about or care about. Yeah. And it's like her perspective that capes are awesome and everything is capes all the time might actually just be intrinsically annoying to the kinds of people that she's trying to connect with. But she's not aware of that. She lacks the perspective to know like that Tristan's answer of being like, let's not talk about how awesome capes are. Let's talk about the sacrifices capes have made. Whereas Victoria's like, oh, clearly everyone wants to know about the suits.
Yeah. Let me tell you about every single cape that's ever worn a suit in the history of capedom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the other things I like is, so we're talking about this management, this tension, how we're on the same page as Victoria. I think the other thing we have to be reminded of is that we, the reader, have meta text to this whole thing. We know we're in a story. While we were on Victoria's page, we're also thinking about the next page and the page after that. So while we see Victoria's tension kind of release as she meets these minor successes and ours kind of matches that, we know in the back of our minds that this is a book and something bad's going to come. Like they're not just going to, like, that's the rules of narrative kind of tell us that the other shoe is going to drop at some point. So while we're manipulating these tensions, we're lowering and raising it, there's always this kind of base level of it. There's always that bomb under the table still. And I think Wildbow knows that we know it, and he uses that. And he uses that to propel you through the conversation. This is ostensibly people sitting in chairs talking to each other. That's what it's 2 chapters of people sitting in chairs talking to each other. There's no action here. There's no traditional set pieces or anything like that, but it's never boring and it propels you through it. And why? It's that tight control of tension, the up and down movement of tension throughout each and every one of these dialogue trees that propels you through to the next sentence and the next sentence and the next sentence. And I think that's, we've talked about this before, and I'm sure I've said something very similar to a heavy dialogue scene in Worm, but that's what makes these books good, is that manipulation of tension. And I just love it.
Yeah, no, this is an absolutely fantastic example of that, and the kind of thing that I want to study in a lot of detail, which we're sort of doing right now.
Yep.
But, so the next turn, the next barb actually comes from Combs again. As I mentioned, he's the one who kind of is hitting a lot harder than they expected, who brings up Amy in context of her stay in the birdcage. Victoria deflects this, and in doing so, partly ends up defending Amy in a way. She says, "Thank you. I was young, but it was hard at the time. A tragedy. My sister, too. We just lost almost half our family. The Slaughterhouse-9 showed up. She broke down. She went to the birdcage because she didn't trust herself." And then Victoria thinks to herself, "It was as kind of a response as I could come up with. I felt a creeping sort of dread with the notion that she might be looking, watching, reading something into this, maybe even showing up unexpectedly." So, I mean, we're always kind of on like Victoria's mentality towards Amy. Watch 2018, and she does sort of defend, like, this is a fairly measured interpretation of what happened with her and her sister. She went to the birdcage because she didn't trust herself. She doesn't even slide any barbs here. She does later, but not here, because she's still kind of holding it down here, and it still freaks her out a little bit. And worth pointing out that she is starting to get freaked out, and her being freaked out is going to get worse and worse as the show continues, because they're going to keep pressing on her.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, this is as factual of a statement as possible. Like, everything she said here was just a fact. Like, she broke down. She went to the birdcage because she didn't trust herself. She's stating facts, and she's making them as neutral as possible, which for her is a defense, because it's her sister who she has all this baggage with. And I love that, to her credit, she dealt with this really well. I think on some level, she knew this was coming, and you can kind of see that the punches are landing, but she's keeping herself on strategy. Like the fact that she just had not only someone talk to her about Amy, she had to speak about her publicly, and she still has the presence of mind to be aware of the strategy. She doesn't go down into like a memory rabbit hole. She even mentions right after this, there was a strategy in play to anticipate that they would go on the offensive and to disarm and lay the groundwork first. She is still clear on what their goal is here and what their strategy is. She hasn't lost sight of that, and her sister was just brought up. So, I mean, she starts off here good, and you're right, we're going to see as we go that is just slowly broken down.
Right, because like, not only is he talking about her sister, but he talks about the hospital. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he's honing in on it, and we're going to see it more and more. So, but they kind of take a break from that. They follow up from that by attacking Lookout, and then when they do this, they don't let the heroes get a word in to defend her. And Hamza then kind of abruptly turns from criticizing Lookout and basically blames Victoria for failing to save her family and loved ones from their fates in Brockton Bay. And man, Scott, it's almost like they've prepared for this, and they're the ones in charge of the show.
Yeah, and I think this is when you switch from being just nervous to you just start getting pissed off, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that these guys don't actually make some points. Like, they say Ashley is a murderer. She is. Tristan is a murderer. He is. I mean, actually, apparently they were just allegations and he was never convicted. So I guess we have to use the word allegedly. But Kenzie did extort her parents. They accuse her of that, and that is true. But then, yeah, suddenly we're blaming Victoria for everything that happened in Brockton Bay. She didn't defeat Leviathan, ergo you're as bad as a murderer. She didn't save her family. She didn't save people, ergo you're comparable to someone who extorted and murdered people. And of course not. That's a ridiculous reach, and I think our host knows that it's a ridiculous reach. And they're not trying to make a rational argument here anymore. They're just attacking and prodding and poking. And, and what this is showing to me, and what we'll basically see confirmed in the next chapter, that while this show is supposed to be about Kenzie, the hosts have looked at the four people on the stage, and they have decided who they feel is the most susceptible to attack. And they are attacking that person, and that is Victoria. And they continue throughout this to attack and poke and prod at her. And they're not trying to convince anyone of anything anymore. They're not trying to make a logical argument. They're just trying to push her to a point where she steps over the line.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that they have some kind of inside track information, that someone has given them the insight that if they go after her in this way, then it's gonna get to her and she's gonna slip. Regarding kind of that that ridiculously bad argument. I think the structure of the argument is basically, you say you want to save people and protect people, but look at all these people you didn't save.
Yeah.
which kind of, like, as stupid as it is, works on an emotional level if you're receptive to it.
Yeah.
Like, that's exactly the kind of stupid argument you'd expect to hear on a cable news, like, debate show.
Especially if you're a person like Victoria who carries such a large amount of guilt for things that an objective person would look at and say, hey, that was out of your control. That's not your fault. But she carries that guilt with her constantly. Yeah. And it's almost as if they know that and they're using it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And what I love about the writing throughout this is that not only are we seeing these attacks, we're seeing Wildbow shows us Victoria's ability to handle them break down slowly. Like I said, we had the first barrage where she was able to go back and focus on her strategy. And now we get this attack and we have, I drew in a breath. The faint noise of the audience was enough to take the oxygen out of that breath. I tried not to let it throw me. This was fine. Expected. Just more of a gut punch than I anticipated. I needed, and then she's cut off. So it's like she's losing it. Like we can see her slowly start to lose it. And it's so like, I love the patience with Victoria. Like it would be very easy to set up the scene where someone goes out and drops Amy and Victoria just snaps, right? It would be very easy to do that. And I don't think that would even break the character too much to do that. But no, we're patient with it. And that's what I mean by the pacing and the tension is the patience that this takes to kind of slowly break down and slowly draw out to finally where she's pushed too far is just so wonderfully doled out.
Yeah, well, we're knocking her back to where she was at the start of the story, basically, which is a really sad way of framing it, actually. But like she's built up so much, strength and resilience, and she's come so far, and they're literally pushing her back to that point where she was willing to lash out at her family with her power to keep them away from her when she felt threatened by them.
Yeah.
So Gary finally begins to make his point, which is basically in line with the other two men, which is that the Capes can't be allowed to be in charge because they're an unhealthy, unstable element. It's interesting that he's almost being sidelined.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah, and I think he's being sidelined because I don't think he's very good at this whole thing. Like you're right, he hasn't dominated the conversation, and I don't think that he constructs, like, it doesn't feel to me like he's trying to manipulate people into agreeing with me. I think he just thinks he's going to go out there and say what he believes and people are going to agree with him here. Like if you want to manipulate people into this thinking that all Capes are bad, I think there's a way to do it. I think by jumping from Breakthrough's bad, all Capes bad, just instantly, I think you kind of hurt your point. You go too broad too soon. And if it were me and I was trying to manipulate people, I'd continue to beat on this idea that Breakthrough is specifically bad. Like, look, these guys are bad. And then you can frame them as, okay, these are these terrible bad guys, but they're like the best example of Capes. Like, who do they have left? These are some of the best examples of Cape left. Let the audience themselves then make that connection, right? Let them take, well, these guys are bad and they're the best the Capes have, and hey, maybe all Capes are bad. And then you haven't like just stated the idea, you've kind of incepted it into their head. And I think that's a much better like manipulation tactic, but that's not doesn't seem that to be that Gary's game at all here.
Yeah, you could go quite deep into that because you could be exactly right. And I'm inclined to agree with you. There's also, just to kind of occurring to me right this minute, it's possible that he's actually just really tapped into the zeitgeist, and people are exactly this angry and bigoted and susceptible to this kind of, like, there's a difference between, like, we've made parallels between this and like racism. Mm-hmm. And there's a difference between like veiled dog whistle racism, but everyone knows what the person's saying, and just open waving the racism flag racism, where the point is for everyone to see how racist they are and agree with them. And he's doing the latter thing, and it may be that that's exactly how bad things actually are right now.
Yeah, and I kind of like that because I think it means that things have gotten so bad that Gary doesn't actually have to construct a clever ruse or clever argument to win these points. All he has to do is state what he thinks, and he wins. And I think that shows exactly that this place has gotten so bad that arguing, debate isn't necessary anymore.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, they move on to, they go back to talking about Lookout. Hamza says the allegations are that she terrorized her parents, controlling every aspect of their lives for over a year. And I asked, shit, there went civility. I beg your pardon.
It's such a shitty way to answer that question.
Yeah.
Oh, Victoria.
Yeah. So Victoria is actually, she's not handling this talk show thing super great, actually. Not to imply that she should be perfect or that, I expect her to be perfect or that it's fair to expect her to do a great job when they're hammering on her like this. But, she's the one to cross the line into rudeness here. Yeah. Even Ashley's keeping it on lockdown. But then again, they're going after her. I'm sure if they were pushing Ashley's buttons, they'd get a similar result.
Yeah, I wonder about, though. I don't actually know. I mean, I agree with you that Victoria is not doing great, and this is another example of how her defenses are slowly being chipped away and worn down. But I don't know if you could push Ashley in similar ways. Like we were talking about, you and I were talking about this a little earlier today, that Ashley and everyone else on the group, rather, their wounds are fairly out in the open. There's nothing that you can kind of reveal or sneak attack them with, unless they know about Jay, in which case that could have been a fucking disaster. But out of everyone here, Victoria is the most closely guarded, and she has the most secrets, and the most they keeps them the closest to her chest. So that makes her the most susceptible to these attacks, and that's why it's working. And I don't know if we were so worried about Ashley, and everyone was so worried about Ashley, and I don't know if this would have gotten to her in that same way. Yeah,
I think Ashley is prepared more than Victoria, if that makes sense.
Well, and everyone's prepared for Ashley's weakness. And this is something we're going to get into in the next chapter, I think, because everyone knows what Ashley's weakness is, just like everyone knows what Kenzie's weakness is, just like everyone knows Tristan or Capricorn's flaws. There's one person who they don't know that much about, and that's the person that's being attacked right now.
Yep.
Oh yeah, and just, I mean, just to kind of reiterate on that, I think we see here in these moments that Swan Song's voice was soft. So not only is she holding it together, but she's even kind of acting here. She's performing. Her voice is softer, not only to compared to Hamza's, but compared to her usual tone as well. So look how good she's doing. She's doing really good here. She's not only managing to control herself, but she's performing.
Yeah. I mean, you can put yourself in her head and you can really imagine she's doing this for Kenzie.
Right.
And she really cares about her, and it absolutely doesn't serve Kenzie to blow her top here. So I think there's a lot that's keeping Swan Song on her good behavior. And Victoria she's focused on Kenzie, but she's also really focused on this, on sort of rehabilitating the image of Capes, which is, I don't think, something she was ever going to accomplish successfully.
I think that was too much of a thing too much of a bite to chew. It's too much to do on a talk show, a format like this.
Yeah. I'll also give an honorable mention to Tristan, who's just being a master here. He kind of judos somebody's comment about oh, you're not crediting the civilians, you're not crediting the non-capes, and he's like, oh, they do good work. Police, patrol block, courts, fire, medical, they're doing the best they can given the circumstances. Admirable considering the circumstances. And I'll tell you this, we're going to give our all to do our share. That's what gets us through the colder months. So it's the format, the perfectly honed format is acknowledge the thing you said, graciously and with humility turn it into refocusing us on the important problems that we want you to be thinking about.
I mean, it's a politician answer to a debate question. I mean, it's beautiful, and Tristan is doing great. And I completely understand how unfair it is to Byron for him to be monopolizing the time, but damn, And it's funny because I think it's ironically his skill at this kind of manipulation that has led him to the trouble that he's had and continues to have, right? Like the type of things that Moonsong accused him of all those time ago, manipulating people and pushing them and pulling them to do what you want and to believe what you want. I mean, this is what makes him good at this is what's causing a lot of his conflict. And again, I have to reiterate that we get through this stuff, we're going to have a Capricorn issue.
Yeah, no, that's true. Like, we've never seen him firing on all cylinders like this. He's said this is his element, and now we believe him.
Yeah.
So, yeah, now we get to the bombshell. Victoria, she spills the beans, Scott.
Yep.
I have to wonder, did they talk about this beforehand? And if so, did they check with anybody outside their circle?
Yeah, I thought about this for a while, and I reread, last week's chapters and these chapters multiple times, trying to see. And I'm fairly sure that the answer to that question is yes. I think Breakthrough definitely discussed this as a strategy internally. Like, as she's sending them down this road of revealing Gold Morning and Scion and everything that happened, she gets backed up by Tristan, and she gets these supportive squeezes from Lookout as she prepares to drop this bomb. So I think if this was going off plan and this was Victoria kind of going off book, she would at least be aware of the surprised, concerned reactions from her teammates. Like, we would see like Capricorn give her a look that like, are you sure this is where you want to go? But we don't see any of that. So I think, yes, her teammates for sure. As far as anyone outside the circle, the other capes, the other part of her communication, I think so. Like, I think part of her reaching out to the other groups and to get permission to appear on the show was to get permission to do this. I said last week, remember, I was a little confused as to what got them on the show when they were originally told no, and I was a little confused about how that all worked. And my speculation with what we know now is that they promised to reveal some kind of big information, and then they went to the other groups and got permission to do so. And that was the the sacrificial goat of, we're going to be the ones to reveal this to the world. And so I think, and based on what we see in the next chapter, everyone's response to them revealing this stuff, it seems like it wasn't a surprise to most of this group. So yeah, I think they knew about it.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. I'm still not convinced that I think the team did discuss it, but I'm not convinced that anyone outside the team knew about it. But I think your argument is sound.
Okay.
So we'll see. I think. So they explained the boogeyman who contained all the powers related information, justifying why Capes didn't share this info before now. And then they explained Scion, the interdimensional alien, on live TV.
Surprise.
Yep. Just gonna go ahead and wrestle this whole plot away from you guys. And then the kind of their point, the reason they bring it up is to say, like, yeah, this is what Scion was, this is what powers are. And the point is that this is proof that Capes are not slave to this. They don't call it the conflict drive, but everyone kind of knows what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. Tristan says we won, and if you have any doubts about how we were programmed, look to the scholars for answers. It's subtle if it's there at all. Focus instead on the fact that when it all came down to it, we concentrated our efforts, looking past petty squabbles. It took a nameless cape to grab us all and drag people from every corner of reality to reinforce. That cape tried to keep us, but when we broke free, we kept fighting, and we fought as one. And Swan Song follows up a bit later. We won, Swan Song said. We defeated the embodiment of that impulse. We can and will defeat it in ourselves. I really like this part. This part made me really emotional, because anytime they talk about Taylor in the story, I get emotional. It feels very earned, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I love Wildbow like throwing kind of shade on the overemphasis of the conflict drive that I know I've been guilty of at times. Like it seems like a very clever, a very easy scapegoat that a lot of people in the community, myself included, fall into sometimes. But isn't it funny how these two quotes here sum up Worm and Ward, right? Like, we defeated the embodiment of that impulse. Worm. We can and will defeat it in ourselves. Ward. I mean, that's the difference. That's the central difference between the two stories, right? Like, we killed the badness, the external badness, and now it's time to look inside and deal with the stuff inside of us. And I love that, like, Ashley manages to just take this whole complicated theme, this whole complicated idea, and distill it down to these 2 sentences. And I'm just like, that's the story. That's what it is.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, those 2 statements don't really follow on each other like that, but they are a nice 1-2 punch of thematic condensation.
Yeah, but when you're editing, Matt, you can just cut them and put them next to each other and then say, look.
do whatever you want. Exactly.
Yeah, the manipulation of analysis.
Yes. But even as the chapter begins to wrap up and these revelations begin to sink in, it's clear from the audience reaction that people aren't necessarily going to like this.
Yeah, and that's kind of the hard thing about truth, right? Sometimes it's tough to hear. I think sharing this information was, in the end, probably a good thing. I think this kind of show format might have not been the best place to do it, but I think it's a good strategy for, one, reflecting the heat off of Lookout specifically and Breakout as a whole, but also, sending a message about communication. Like, Victoria's whole thing is communication amongst capes, communication to everyone else. We want to share. And it's probably something that they should have done a long time ago. And they're doing it now. But I worry, Matt, I worry that it might be too late. I worry that what they've done is just basically confirm everyone's worst nightmare. We've taken parahumans and potentially just thrown away the human part of that word. Now everyone knows that in each and every one of these people's heads is a piece of an alien. And I think in a perfect world, this would allow for an opportunity for reflection. We'd see capes as what they really are, which is victims of powers and forces that are beyond their control. But this is not a perfect world. And I think a lot of scared and angry people just got a very good reason to mistrust parahumans even more. They have fucking aliens in their heads.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of reminds me of similar conversations that we've had on this show and off of this show, where it's like, if you know that someone is a violent psychopath because they had the misfortune of being born with the brain that made them that way, we as a society don't generally say like, oh, well, that's fine then. It's their brain.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's we draw the line around the person such that we hold them culpable for that, and we put them in jail, and we consider them to be a frightening risk. So like just like we do right now, people aren't going to give them any slack, I don't think. So yeah, the chapter 8.12 continues, and we just don't miss any time, really. The hosts are on their back foot, the audience is buzzing, and Breakthrough takes a quick huddle during the commercial break. Victoria recognizes that they're under. Basically, she thinks she's not trying to find the flow of things and steer with it, but caught with nothing to keep us afloat. The water's rushing away to gather strength for the incoming wave.
I love that imagery, don't you? I mean, like, they've just released this bombshell, and they're like, okay, the pressure's off right now, but I still am aware that things are coming. Like, this isn't over. Yeah. It's a perfect way in the first paragraph of the chapter just to say, basically, this isn't over.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because this imagery right here, it reminds me of like scary beach situations I had as a kid, when you would get in that situation where, a particularly big wave sneaks up on you and you're like, oh shit.
Yeah. You're just,
there's nothing you can do about it.
You're just completely out there, and
yeah.
There's no shield, there's no protection, there's nothing you got. When this thing hits you, you're screwed, and that's almost exactly what happens.
Yeah. And then we get this. So there's a couple details from Tristan in this chapter that I want to highlight, because maybe I just missed or misinterpreted things. But it felt like new information to me. Maybe you or the listeners can help clarify this for me. Tristan says, I'm vulnerable, not so much credibility as dark, going back to my murder charge, making me out to be a bad guy. And then I think Victoria replies, "We talked about that briefly. I would have liked actual details so I can back you up." But and then Capricorn continues, "But my brother wants it left in the past. If it comes up, I'll deal with it." So it's Byron who wants it left in the past?
Yeah, that's very interesting because like all this time Tristan's been talking about the bad time, right, where he kind of went bad and he's never refuted the murder charge, right? Like, I mean, like, it doesn't seem like he was ever convicted, but he's never said, "No, I did not murder that person." But I always kind of assumed because it was Tristan talking about this stuff, it was Tristan that was responsible for it. He's the one that went dark. He's the one that did this. So either Tristan's just lying here and it's not Byron that wants it left in the past. He's just shoving it on him because he can't fight back. Or maybe Byron had more culpability in Dark Recorn than we originally assumed. Or maybe it's a little bit both. I don't know. Either way, I will reiterate my concern for Capricorn right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting that you think of Byron as being all above board and straight laced, but he's like, no, we're not going to talk about that thing that happened. Even if it was all Tristan, Byron's the one who kind of is trying to brush it under the rug.
Yeah,
which kind of makes sense because if you're sharing a body with the guy, you know, you don't want to have to deal with him being put in prison.
Yeah, that would suck because like I have to go to jail because of what you did. So please, can we got a break here. We got a lucky break. Can we please just move past this? I don't want to look at it. I don't want to think about it anymore. That's a good point. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things we're doing here though is we're huddling and we're talking about each one of their weak points and where they could be hit. They have this break. They've kind of seen their strategy and they're like, okay, how can they hit us? And Capricorn talks about his shit. Lookout talks about her shit. Ashley says she's not even really there, so she could easily deflect by saying, "Hey, I'm in prison. Like I'm just as a hologram. I'm over in prison."
Yeah.
Victoria says the shit that they could hit her with is, "I kept my powers from the patrol block." So that's it, Victoria. That's all they can hit you with. There's nothing else. No other things they could use to hit your credibility with. No other lines of attack against you. None. That's it. It's just that you hid your powers from your control block. That's it. And here I think, Matt, is the central problem with Victoria still hiding so many of the details of her time in the hospital and the fact of both wretches, the wretch in the hospital and the wretch that is now, from the rest of her team. Victoria is not interested in thinking about that stuff. And so either she's purposefully not thinking about it or she's just pushed it so far out of her mind it doesn't come up when she's thinking about weaknesses. And nobody else knows about it. So it just goes unnoticed. So as we move back from our commercial break and these hosts prepare to drop their big Victoria guns, nobody's prepared for it. Sveta, the only person that knows the true detail about this stuff, isn't there. She's not there. If Sveta was there, maybe she would have said, "Hey, Victoria, they might go hard on this stuff right here. Like, it seems like that's where they're going, and I know enough about your past to know that." But she's not there, and she hasn't shared with anyone else on the team, so they're kind of powerless to really come to her defense because they don't understand enough. And that we've been talking about the danger of Victoria not sharing with the team over and over again, and I think what happens here is a perfect example of why that's so dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about the fact that, first of all, she doesn't share with them and that Sveta knows the stuff, but Sveta is one of the more closed-mouthed among them. Mm-hmm. We've been talking about that all this time, and I think this is one of, if not the moment where we get the consequences of that lack of sharing and transparency.
Yeah.
So, moving on through this little powwow they're having, Victoria says, "Don't hand them the ball. Morality, that stuff, don't bring it up. They'll use it to launch into the topic." And we here at Doof Media really agree with this advice. Don't bring up morality.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. I would have really appreciated that like a year ago. It would have been great.
So Swan Song then mentions that the hosts could make them leave now, which would rob them of their momentum and give the hosts opportunity to just spin the situation to suit their own ends.
Yeah, which is a pretty good point to bring up. And I'm sure that won't become relevant here in a couple minutes at all.
No.
And I think it's important to note just how like stressed Victoria is about that idea. Like there's this whole moment when they're talking and they're like looking at as the time ticks down to the commercial break, and they're like, okay, it's way too close. It's way too close to coming back for them to kick us off now. I think we're in the clear. And she's like really stressed about it because that would be bad. Them leaving early and allowing the last word to be given by the people trying to paint them as bad people would be a bad thing to happen.
Yeah. Yep. Whoops. Yeah, so when the show returns, they first play a clip of Kenzie's horrible parents.
Fuck this so much. I hate cable news. I hate these people. I hope the wretch punches all their faces off. Like this bullshit. Oh, we did so much for her. We gave her after school activities and piano lessons, and we tried to get her to play sports, but she didn't like sports. Fuck you guys. You shoved her face into a plate until it sliced her cheek open. You fuck. Okay, I'm done.
I agree with everything you just said. All right.
It makes me so angry. It's like it's such like patented like bullshit like hit piece manipulation. Like it's
Yeah. What's funny is like I have a hard time disentangling the fact that I already know that they're pieces of shit and interpreting what they're saying as like, God, you're so full of shit. But like it's hard to hear it the way a neutral third party would hear it.
Right.
You know, because it might come off fine. I can't tell because I hate them so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so next Capricorn beat that I wanted to pull out here, one of the hosts says, Capricorn was facing trial with proceedings benched indefinitely until the end of the world erased all records. So that's interesting. And I'm not sure if I knew or recalled this either, that the murder charge wasn't dropped and he wasn't acquitted. It was more like the proceedings were stalled and then the end of the world happened, so he just got out of it scot-free.
Yeah, and I think this has been alluded to before, but I don't think it's ever been spelled out like as clearly as it is here. So I understand that seeming like news.
Yeah, I think the way that Moonsong reacts to his presence makes it seem like justice wasn't done in her mind, but I thought that was just her being crazy. But it turns out this is true. Justice wasn't done.
Justice was not done, and she's crazy can be two things. Both those can be true, Matt.
That's true.
But I think this is important because it kind of fits the strategy that they're taking here in this second chapter. That we granted amnesty for these capes, but it wasn't amnesty for everyone. That people who did terrible things don't face consequences, while regular humans, on the other hand, don't get so lucky as that. Which, I mean, that's kind of bullshit. Like, Gary argues here that Kenzie's parents didn't get a second chance, that they were just tossed in jail based off of their past crimes and nothing else. But that only can be true if you just ignore or dismiss every bit of evidence that has happened since then, which is, exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
But I think another thing this does is also show us one of the central disconnects of both the story and like this moment, right? Like this idea, we've talked about this on one of our discussion questions before about what is forgiveness, because so much of this book is about second chances, earned or otherwise. And that Wildbow is framing one of the central divisions of this whole cape versus human thing as this question around worthiness of forgiveness and second chances on both sides, I think is a really sharp move. And Gary's point in this whole thing seems to be twofold to me. And because he's a bigot, Matt, those points actually just outright contradict themselves, because that's what happens when you're a bigot. First, he says the amnesty was not universally implemented. As evidence, here's the Martins. They were unjustly convicted for past crimes, while other people like Capricorn were allowed to walk free. So look, we treat the capes better because capes get off for crimes, but here's the Martins that were judged for past crimes. But then his second point is that the amnesty should not be distributed universally. Incredibly powerful people who have hurt people in the past should not be forgiven for these past crimes. It's too dangerous to do that. That's too dangerous to give people a pass. And those are completely opposing points, right? Like you can't both argue that we should have a universal amnesty, but also we should not have a universal amnesty because I don't like these people. So it's just amnesty just for the people I like, not so much for the people I don't like.
Yeah, basically amnesty except for capes.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this, by the way, just so we're clear, makes him a fucking dickhole.
That's accurate. So Gary again brings up Amy and emphasizes in front of millions of people that she could kill everybody in the world if she wanted.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I wonder why she would maybe feel inclined to seek out some kind of protection in response to this kind of situation.
Yeah. I wonder. I wonder, like, if it's a cable news program that's like trying to scare people into action or something. Like, like your sister, Amy Dallin of 234 Evil Street, phone number 555, literally Satan, could wipe us all out at any moment. So why don't you just go, maybe just deal with that, people, if you just want to go deal with that. Like it's such cable news, like to scare people. We know her name. Like it's irresponsible to do something like this. It's intentionally trying to rile people up. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And what makes me so fucking angry about it is we're sitting here having a discussion about second chances and giving everyone new opportunities. And Gary basically goes, well, speaking of second chances, what about your rapist, Victoria? You surely don't believe that the person that raped you deserves to be walking around on the street. I'm just going to continually remind you of this terrible thing that this person did to you on national TV to force you to agree with my side because I believe my side's right. And it's just fucking awful. It's awful.
Yeah, as one of the team members says later, sleazy is the word. It's gross, and it's good of them that they point it out when it happens.
Yeah, I mean later they say how dare you, right? But how fucking dare you? Like it's
right.
Fuck you.
Yeah. I mean, and we get to the point of it right now because John Combs, the guy who's been pushing, most of this time, who I'm now picturing as John Hamm, pulls this shit. She put you in the hospital, John Combs said. We've gone over this. And you needed special facilities, he continued, because she went to the birdcage, the Bauman Parahuman Containment Center, and she left you with 8 arms, 10 hands, 3 heads with 1 additional face that had no head or skull to go with it. 2, I used my aura hard, and I wasn't sure it was purely by reflex. It was the closest thing I had at hand to slapping him across the face. So this is the moment.
Yeah. The thing about this, as someone who analyzes story, this makes me angry, but I also love it. Like from a story perspective, right? Like I love how this was set up. I love how it pays off, and I love you can view this whole interaction as Victoria walking onto the stage with a metaphorical version of her force field, right? And she walks on the stage and she's got her shield up and it takes blow after blows and she stands there and she's okay because she's protected by that shield. And then they hit her with a hit that's too hard and the shield pops. And then suddenly it's just her. And like she said, waiting for the wave to hit. And her response to that is to fight back, to push back, to go on the offensive. And I love the detail here. I love that I wasn't sure it was purely by reflex. That the implication there is I wanted this. I knew that I was doing this and I did it anyway because I wanted it. Because I wanted to slap this guy across the face and this was the only way I could do it.
Yeah. And or she's just angry enough that she's willing to.
Yeah.
She's so angry and upset that it makes sense in the moment. And it's not because reflex implies no choice. There is a choice, but it's a purely emotional choice.
And it's so fucking terrible that she was backed into this corner. But it's such a colossal fuck up too. Like we talked about last week, the team was in this kind of intense argument about Ashley. Should Ashley go on the show? Is it a good idea for us to put Ashley up on that stage? Was she too much of a risk or not? no one even thinks about if Victoria is too much of a risk on that stage.
Yeah.
And again, I think it has to be, with the exception of Sveta, they don't fully understand Victoria's situation, so they can't correctly gauge whether or not it's too much of a risk for her to stand up on that stage. Hardboiled knew it, but her own team didn't, and they won. They won.
Yeah. The win isn't perfect because Tristan comes in here with the interception. How dare you, opening up someone's old... emphasis. How dare you, Capricorn retorted, opening up someone's old wounds and getting affronted when they react. So, like, he's great here because he's trying to save the fact that she did this and justify it in a way that's pretty relatable. But I don't think he's going to succeed at that.
Yeah, I think it's too late. I mean, it's just like... You can't counter the terror aura with words of indignation. Like, it's just not going to work. Nobody's going to buy it if they're even still listening. Like that. I mean, that's the thing we see here is, I can't remember which one of it. I think it's probably Hanzo, right? Who says, how dare, he's the one who says, how dare you? And Capricorn says his thing, and then he just repeats it as if he's just completely dismissed everything Capricorn said. And that's what everyone's going to do. It doesn't matter. It doesn't, like, this argument's gone now. Like the aura, like, you just terrified with a power. Not just the use of the power in general terrified you, but the point of the power was to terrify you. Like, your argument's gone. Like, even if that's not fair, and it's not fair at all. But it's just gone. It's just like, sorry, thanks for playing.
Yeah, right. I also like the fact that everyone describes it as like a terror aura when up till now it's just been like, oh yes, it's my intimidation / awe aura. Right. It's like, no. Now it's your terror aura, Victoria.
Yeah, I mean, it also implies that if her aura truly works the way she has historically believed it is, it implies that every single person in this room was so terrified of her before she even used the aura, saw her as a scary person.
Good point. And then Victoria stands up sharply, an act she realizes will be perceived as an aggressive power move, but in this moment, she feels the need to regain control. She goes on to talk about where powers come from and her perspective that their job is now to manage the fallout of Scion's defeat. And she's talking about forgiveness, and she says, as you guys said, my so-called sister hospitalized me. I'm not forgiving or forgetting. I'm not giving her a pass. A person destroyed me, and I'm not going to bang my drum and demand they see the inside of a prison. So she's trying to use herself as an example of how to move forward, because she's clearly really good at that.
Yeah, but it's right. I mean, that's the irony of it, right? Is she's saying, yeah, like, look at me as an example, but it's not great. But I think we've seen how much she's regressed here, right? Like, my so-called sister, like, that's how much in this short time she's kind of been pushed backwards, as you said, kind of regressed to a pre-start of book state, that like she doesn't even want to claim her as a sister anymore. But I kind of love this argument that she makes, and I think it's such an important distinction regarding the kind and the meaning of the forgiveness that people have been talking about. Victoria said the first time we met her in Glowworm that she doesn't believe in forgive and forget, but she has clearly always on some level supported the amnesty. Why? And I think that's because to her specifically, and maybe largely, there's a difference between forgiving someone and giving someone a second chance. Mm-hmm. We talked about this way back in that discussion question a while ago. Victoria hasn't forgiven anyone. She hasn't forgiven her mom. She hasn't forgiven Amy. She hasn't forgiven herself for all the things she thinks that she's done wrong. Mm-hmm. But from this and all the other actions we've seen in the book so far, it seems like she, on some level, believes people deserve the opportunity to prove that maybe they're not that bad person anymore, to prove that they've changed. And I think that's because, in essence, that's what she wants for herself. She wants a second chance to make up for the mistakes of her past. She blames herself for so much of the stuff that happened before, not only for just what she did, the overly violent actions she did as Glory Girl, but the events that led her up to the hospital. She said over and over again, this was my fault. I failed to do this. I should have done this. I should have listened. She's blamed herself for all this stuff, and she wants an opportunity to make it right. And so forgiveness and second chances to Victoria are not the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that may be why she doesn't want Amy in prison also, is that she feels a little bit culpable for Amy's situation in the first place.
Yeah.
More than a little bit, actually. So even though Amy terrifies her.
Yeah, I mean, she absolutely terrifies her, but even maybe especially Amy in her mind deserves an opportunity, at least. Victoria might have convinced herself that any day now Amy's going to go bad, and she might firmly believe that, but she doesn't spend every day yelling at the wardens or yelling at whoever's in charge that Amy needs to be in prison. That's not what she spends her time doing. So at least on some level, she thinks that she deserves a shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. So Gary continues pressing the attack. You make it very easy to fear you. You don't give us many reasons to trust you. Swansong replies, you don't give us much reason to trust you. If you can't help us, stay out of our way and let us do what we need to. I wanted to correct that, to reject it. I let it stand. Which I love that phrasing, because it makes you feel like she's like, yeah, like she agrees fundamentally. Like she doesn't like the way it's worded, but she accepts the sentiment, I think. Yeah. Which is kind of the whole problem here.
Yeah, I mean, she recognizes the bad optics in that sentence. And telling the entirety of humanity to stay out of our way and let us do our stuff is not good optics. But she, at this point, she agrees with it.
Yeah. So the team then comes together to basically prematurely cap off the segment by giving their plug for their support organization, asking people to reach out for them.
Which is like a pretty hilarious pivot, right? Can you imagine if like a politician got up on stage and just like screamed at an entire audience and then finished with, vote for me?
Yeah.
It's basically that.
Yeah. Hashtag capes are safe. Yeah. I'm not a crook.
I'm not a crook.
Yeah. And then, Lynn, the hostess, replies, you're talking like you're done, but we still have half the show left. Was I? Were we? I was. We were. Which is, beautiful. Like when you're reading it, you're like, yeah, power move, but also terrible, terrible optics.
Yeah. I mean, remember how horrified she was that they would make them leave prematurely and thus get control of the entire narrative without them there to defend themselves? Well, this is like exactly what's going to happen now, except they're leaving them on like the most negative sentiment out of the whole thing, right? Like at the commercial break before, they had just dropped this bomb, but they were doing well. Like they were still kind of in control. They've lost control now, and now they're leaving. And it's just like this other half of the show is just going to be brutal.
Yep. It's a shame we don't get to see that. We'll trust the process, I said. So will I, Gary said. We left the hot illumination of the set into the dimly lit side area beneath the staring, hostile eyes of the crowd in their seats.
Oh, beautiful.
That went great. So, more heat, light imagery, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, this was a disaster. This is an absolute disaster. And like, I think we're going to get into the areas in which it won't be a disaster, which I think is going to be very interesting for the ongoing conflict here. But it's just like you see things start off so well. They were in control of the narrative. They were directing the conversation where they wanted to. And then it just fell apart so fast. And maybe, I mean, you could argue, and I think we're going to, that this was never going to go well for them. That even if Victoria wasn't pushed to this point, it might not have mattered, but certainly not a good look.
Yeah. So yeah, they get back to their base and they weather the storm of incoming emails. There's an endless barrage of hate mail coming in at an incredible rate. The team is actually just kind of staring in shell shock, watching it all come in real time. Yeah. And at one point, they all kind of fixate on this one particular email that's just like a long, painful personal letter of blame.
Yeah, I really appreciate that the story takes the time to really focus on the fallout of this. It's not enough for us to just leave there knowing how bad it went. We see the results here. And we start this whole section off with Victoria saying the mention of the wretch on national television had felt like the moment the wave had connected. It hadn't been. That was just for me, my own misshapen boat on the uneven dark waters. The implication here is that the worst part of it, the wave, is the negative reaction, is seeing these emails pour in 16 in 10 seconds, and sometimes like just the hatred and the terribleness pour in, and we don't shy away from it. The book makes us see that painful letter that you're talking about. This it's real if yes, displaced and improperly pointed pain and anger of real people that suffered and now have turned all of that pain and anger that they don't understand and they don't know what to do with, and now they have a focal point for it. And it's this team in particular and Cape, manity at large. And yeah. I love that even as Victoria is convinced to walk away from this, to stop looking at it, and she closes her laptops, throughout the conversation, we see her like glance over at other people's computers and see it continue to pour in. Even when she looks away from it, she can't fully look away from it.
Yeah, this wave, I wonder if they had... their idea was, okay, we're going to get out in front of this PR disaster. We're going to protect Kinsey. And instead, they have brought this wave upon themselves, which I have to wonder, if they hadn't gone on TV, would they just be fielding a couple of letters talking about Kinsey specifically and getting a good night's sleep?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, did they create this themselves? Or were they lured into this? Like, were they set up for this,
Yeah. I mean, I think,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah. So Victoria asks Sveta if they did okay. And Sveta is basically like, no, not really. But in nicer Sveta-like words, which causes Victoria to not really hear the message.
Yeah, she's walking on eggshells around her, right? And she tries to frame the failure as politically as possible. She says the whole shit show is just... everyone's just mad because you took over the broadcast. And while I'm sure that's part of the reason they're upset, because like one of the problems people have with capes is they tend to go into something and take it over. But she frames it all as that. And Victoria's response is, you're right. I like that perspective. That's not a mea culpa. That's not, I recognize what went wrong here. It's like, I appreciate how you framed this thing, because it doesn't necessarily mean that it was my issues or my fuck up that caused this. Mm-hmm. And that got me thinking that it is interesting that nobody here is blaming her. Like, at least we don't see it. Like, there's not a lot of talking to Victoria in this moment, so maybe they're talking about it to each other. But I like to think that, once again, we're circling the wagons and protecting their own. Like, we've seen Breakthrough do that time and time again, where someone in their group fucks up and we kind of circle around them and protect them. And it feels like that's what's happening again. Yeah,
I mean, my mind goes to Chris here. Like, you'd think Chris would be like, Jesus Christ, right. And you guys are always on my case,
right.
But no, he's just kind of chilling, actually.
Yeah, but I think that's dangerous, because sometimes you need someone to sit you down and be like, look, you fucked up. Like, I understand why it happened. I understand you were pushed. I get all this, but look, you got to A, talk to the team about your shit, and B, we got to start working on some of this stuff, because that was bad.
Yeah.
Before we move on, there's one more quote that really jumped out at me in this whole Victoria Sveta combination. She says, Sveta's argument is that you took over, you took control, and that pissed everyone off. And Victoria's response is, if we let them have control, it was going to end in disaster. And I know she's specifically talking about these hosts and this show, right? But if we look at this quote, isn't this kind of like a microcosm of the entire Cape human conflict, right? Like that Capes feel like they have to take over because if they don't, everything is going to end in disaster. And humans are here just like, wait, what? No, like we're good too.
Yeah.
And I think that's like just like if we don't have control, if we don't take over, everything's fucked. And
yeah,
I love that I love the double meaning of that, right? Like it's specific while also being broad.
Yeah. I mean, it's repeating what like her thought process when she stood up, when she's like, this is getting away from me. I need to retake control.
Right.
It's like, no, that's like the worst possible. Like you're throwing control away in your desperation to grab it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, then something very sad. Victoria feels a touch of the old dysphoria as her phone buzzes.
Oh yeah, this is like, it's heartbreaking. And I think I really love what you said, and I'm going to repeat myself again, but about how we've kind of rolled her back to almost chapter 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I love that we do this from a storytelling standpoint, because this is a really good way of getting across to the reader just how fucked up this has left her, because Victoria's kind of in a daze right now, and I don't think she's fully absorbed how bad this is, both for her own mental health and for like her group as a whole. So I don't think her narrative voice is really capable of fully conveying the depth of her despair right here. But in one sentence referencing her dysphoria, we get it. We understand. We fully understand the low that she's at right now. And I think it's such a quick, efficient way of communicating that to us, where in a first person story, sometimes you run across a problem where how can I communicate this when I want my character to not be aware of it? And I think that's a really great way of doing it.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of her being in a daze, like she thinks that she's used to being a Cape with no secret identity, but we've seen like one random person recognize her in public. Mm-hmm. She just went on a TV show that's implied to be watched by millions of people. It's a popular show. I don't know if she thought through the ramifications of that to walking around with her civilian face on.
No.
Yeah.
And they all know now that she used to be a monster, right? Yeah. I mean, that's her worst nightmare.
Right.
And
exactly.
I mean, you got to wonder, did she think that was impossible? Like, I know a lot of records were lost in Gold Morning, but did she think it was like no one would know about her hospital stay? Like,
I think she just thought no one would go after her.
Yeah.
Like why would they go after me?
Yeah, this is about Kenzie.
Which is it's a fair thing, because I mean, she was set up. I mean, narratively speaking, this was a trap.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And there was no way that she it's reasonable for her to think like, oh yeah, this is supposed to be about Kenzie. I'm it's super low and again sleazy to do that, so they probably won't. It looks really bad to do that. She miscalculated and but
well, and I think it again shows these people have a really great understanding of who Victoria is, right? Because if they went directly for Victoria, I don't think she appears on the show.
Yeah.
But
well, yeah, because there's nothing she didn't do anything wrong. She's just someone they can manipulate.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the phone buzzing, it's her parents telling her that them and their team are back in the organization.
Yep.
Yay, except Carol ruins it by reminding her not to be mean to her sister. You're doing so well, Carol.
Not now, Carol. I mean, like, damn it.
Like now? Really now?
Now, to be with the intent of being the absolute maximum amount of charitable towards Carol, I do think Amy's probably not taking this very well either, right? I think this is probably really hard on her. She just had a man stand on national television or universal television and say, hey, this person is monstrous bioweapon that could at any moment just kill us all, which probably doesn't like feel good when you're a person that's like trying to work through your problems and move past the terrible things that you've done in the past. Probably not a great feeling for you. Yeah, I mean, should Carol have brought it up in this moment? No, fuck no. That was terrible and stupid. But I think her heart was in the right place here. I really do.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, someone should be thinking of how Amy's doing.
Yeah. Like, I hope her parents have called her.
Yeah.
Like, if I call Victoria first, she was the one on TV. Yeah, but I hope their next call is Amy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so they also hear from Mayday, who seems to maybe be on board. It's not really clear.
Yeah. But I think the most interesting part about what we're seeing here is that this little event that Victoria just participated in, as bad as it went, has appeared to bring most of the capes that were willing to work with them back to the fold. And that's really interesting, right? Because if that's true, then what we've done here is galvanized the sides against each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've taken
polarized.
We've taken the two sides and we pushed them further away from each other. And now it is definitely Cape versus human in a way that it has never been before. And I think it's just thematically perfect that happened on a cable TV news show.
Yeah.
Because that's what fucking cable TV news does. It polarizes people against each other. Like,
yeah.
and that's, I mean, so I think for Victoria's band of capes, you could see it as a victory. Like they set out to accomplish what they wanted, which was stop our organization from collapsing. But in the long term, there are two sides now.
Yeah.
And they are clearly defined sides.
Right. They may have stopped their organization from collapsing by showing their organization how much hostility they were facing and forcing them to band together for solidarity, which is
right.
Not what she was after, I think.
No, yeah. I mean, it just means things will get worse.
Yep. So abruptly, they realize that they've received an important email. It's Goddess with a simple request. Meet. Victoria recognizes that this is related to what the team were hiding from her yesterday or earlier. Anyway, they show her what they hid from her before, which is a series of images of Amy meeting with Goddess multiple times. It's unavoidable, I said, half of my meaning intended to follow Sveta's last statement, half for myself to warn me of the present day, to warn the me of the present day of what was coming.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you'll agree with me that this feels like the end of an arc, right? Like we're going to have an interlude, but this is it. This is the end of Arc 8.
Probably, yeah.
I don't think I've ever been more excited for an arc ending in Ward. I love this so much. Our characters just had this whole debate, this whole public debate about the idea of second chances, the idea of forgiving and forgetting, and the difference between those two things, and how that plays out in Cape versus human interactions. And we see this idea that Victoria doesn't want her Amy in jail, but I think on some level, Victoria believed and believes that it was only a matter of time before Amy goes bad again. Like we saw that, I think it was the second arc, right? Where she was talking to Jessica and said, look, Amy's going to be a problem. Like she might be the biggest problem we're all facing. And a lot of bad stuff has happened since then. But I think that did show us that Victoria is utterly convinced that it's only a matter of time.
Yeah.
And here in front of her in pictures is evidence of that exact thing. We see Goddess, the current like big bad as far as we know of the story, meeting with Victoria's own personal big bad. And to our hero, this is, prophecy fulfilled. This is, I was expecting this. I always knew this was going to happen. This is a confirmation of everything I feared was going to happen.
Yeah, right. It reminds me that she seems to literally think that Amy got the villain gene from her father.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's how kind of biased she is. But yeah, it's incredibly well set up and
sure, yeah.
And makes perfect sense, and I love it.
Yeah. But to me personally, my, ongoing prediction, I think this kind of confirms to me that things with Goddess are just not as simple as our characters have painted them, right? Maybe I'm cutting Amy too much slack here, but I really don't think the story is going to be, and then Amy is terrible and wants to destroy everyone with Goddess, and they're all going to be evil together, and like I just don't buy that. So
right.
I think this is confirmation that what her goal is, what she wants, is going to be different than we think it is. And man, I can't wait for that conversation.
Me too. And looking forward to the next one. That wraps up arc. Well, I can't say that yet. No, that wraps up these two chapters. Yeah, there's gonna be an interlude. So I don't think we got any name. I mean, we got the names of the hosts, which I'm sure were chosen in some extremely careful way, but I can't say anything smart about them.
One of their last names was Chess.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
They were like playing chess.
Yeah, they were setting up the board and checkmating and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So discussion question for this week. So we pointed out on this episode the ways in which Wildbow uses his skill at pace and tension to take a scene that doesn't involve a lot of traditional action set pieces and to make it a figurative page turner. What are some of your favorite examples of how Wildbow has done this in other areas of Worm/Ward?
I like that question.
Yeah, thank you. That's Scott's question, and I agree that is a great question because my favorite types of questions tend to be the ones about writing, and I really love, like Scott said, that's really an area where Wildbow just shines and is really quite masterful, actually. So yeah, I'd love to be reminded of all these perfect scenes of tension and page turneriness.
Yeah, it turns out, Matt, we like writing. Who knew?
Yeah, I'm learning this about myself. Well, that's all we got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading. You can reach out to us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or on Twitter @gotwormpod. My personal Twitter is @scottdaily85, and Matt's is @moredinamail. I don't have a joke this time. It's just that's just what it is. Yeah. Good luck spelling it, though. Yeah, no, you can't. If you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts. And as always, you can find this, all the other podcasts we do, over at our brand new shiny website, doofmedia.com. This week on our other channels, we'll have a new episode of the Doofcast for you, as well as a new Vow to View covering disaster movies, and hopefully, fingers crossed, a new episode of Weaver Dice as soon as I send that file over to Matt. Which Matt, it's coming, Matt. Yeah. And then I can start actually editing it. Thanks, Scott. Thank you. It's coming. Yeah. And if you like any of our shows and you want to support us, consider donating to our Patreon account, patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Supporting us on Patreon gives you tons of great bonuses, like voting in our quarterly fan art contest, which is coming up. Wrapping up soon. Q&A sessions with us, access to live streams of our recording sessions, like this very one, which is being participated in by some of our patrons, and our excellent and lively Discord chat. Special thanks to new Bidoof Lachlan at the $3 level. Bidoof. Yeah, is that the first Bidoof that we've... No, we had some last week. Sorry. Oh, well. Yeah. Welcome to the Doof Squad. That's right. And as always, make sure you go over to Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/Wildbow, and donate to him as well, because this is his world. We're just being tortured on television for it. Yeah. And if you can't afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. You can instead help us out by heading on over to Apple Podcasts and leaving us a rating and a review. This week's review comes from TMS, who gives us 5 stars and says, "Here's an award for a great podcast. Excellent analysis, thought-provoking commentary, and a little bit of fanboying.
A little bit. Blends
very
together.
generous.
Yeah. Blends together to make this a seminal podcast for parahumans past and present. Keep it up. Thank you so much, TMS, and thank you every single one of you that have taken the time to leave us a rating and review. We know some of you don't leave the reviews, but you still rate us, and that helps too. I know some of you, like, I have trouble coming up with things to say on reviews sometimes on all my podcasts, so I'm just like, 5 stars. This is great. So that even helps too. So we appreciate you guys taking the time to do that so much.
Yeah, we do. All right, that's it for the show this week. Next week, we'll be finishing up Arc 8, probably, and possibly moving on to Arc 9.
Hey, Matt, do you have any guesses on Arc 9's title?
Inferno.
Whoa.
How about you?
I went more positive. I'm going with Radiance.
We'll just